What is up, people? It is Dave, it is Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new release from Deathcore giants OCEANO. The band's new album, Living Chaos, will be released on August 30th via Sumerian Records. The American deathcore juggernauts OCEANO return with their sixth album, their first album in 7 years, and the long-awaited follow-up to their 2017 release, Revelation. The album was recorded at the Nook Recording Studio in Illinois and the Foundation Recording Studio, and was produced, mixed and mastered by Joey Sturgis, with additional engineering from Nick Nativo. OCEANO, I was excited for this, Duncan.
We did I feel it was last year we reacted to.
Yeah, probably. Maybe
must have been like, so they teased like it was a new single, there was an album coming sometime, and I want to say it was towards the end of last year, and we both sat down to watch it in different positions on OCEANO. I remember them from back in the day, and I remember thinking they slotted well amongst the sound of all those other bands who were, like, in a lot of respects a little bit more techy, a little bit vocally a little bit more gruff than some of the other bands that sat in that oeuvre. But I remember like never really rushing back to them because I kind of felt like, right, remove those elements and there wasn't anything that stood out. And then we reacted to the single, which I was all in for because it was all this atmospheric stuff, and you were like that. Oh, they've been like the last couple of albums, they've leaned into the atmospherics, and I was like, have they, Dave? You're like, yeah, like OCEANO have been doing this for a while, Duncan. Yeah. You clearly don't know what you're on about. You were never a fan.
Dude.
You called me out on that, maybe off here. I don't think it made the video. But you kind of did school me to the point that this has been I'm interested to check this one out because whilst deathcore is now awash with people using like kind of atmospheric, droney, weird, creepy synthy sims in the background, what I heard from that single wasn't actually that used at all. If anything, it was actually more underpinned with melody, which was where I was excited because I've got plenty of the other stuff. I want the stuff that does the other stuff.
I mean, OCEANO had been doing the creepy atmospheric stuff for decades before, like all these other bands.
Everyone else,
I'm an OCEANO OG. Like I'm an OGiano. You know what I mean? Like I'm one of those guys.
See if they haven't cottoned onto that. That's a t-shirt right there. As a like original artwork, anniversary tour, OGiano on the back. Give a cut to Dave.
You can have it.
Just cite our site at the bottom, the website at the bottom of the t-shirt. OGiano, amazing.
I've been listening to the band since like depth since 2009. I've pretty much been following them ever since. I got to see them live for the first time just like a couple of years back in Glasgow.
I wasn't there, was I?
No, I was at that one myself.
Before I forget that gig, I make an absolute cunt of myself on a video. Let's.
They were over with Decapitated and Despised Icon and Distant.
Oh, that was the fucking the Mega Fest.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called. But they were awesome. Like I'd never seen them live before, but I've been listening for ages, so it was really cool to hear like all that material that I'd been listening to for so long live. They took a break after Revelations, and to be honest, I was unsure if we're ever going to get anything again from OCEANO at that point. Turns out that they hadn't really stopped behind the scenes. Scott, the guitarist, had still been writing like behind, even though they were on a kind of a break as such. Scott had been kind of continuing to write riffs and ideas in the background. So some of the material that's on this album was written 4-5 years ago. But I think from what I can tell online, I think they had planned to release it before COVID, and then everything just kind of got pushed back, and lockdown, pandemic, and they just kind of shelved it for a bit. And now just kind of seemed like the time to do it. It's an interesting one because this is like the kind of new wave of OCEANO, where they still have the elements that make them Oceano. You can tell you're still like listening to the same band, but there's a lot that's different about this. This feels to me like a band that have kind of developed their sound to represent where they are now, as a band, as musicians, as people. They're kind of moving with the times, and giving us an album that will still like rip a tidal wave sized hole in you, but
Mhm.
is kind of peppered with ideas and elements that's given the Oceano sound like a kind of fresh coat of paint almost. I must admit I was like, being totally honest, going into this, I was absolutely buzzing to hear it. And then I stuck it on. The first track, Wasted Life, kicked in, and I finished that first track, and I was like, kind of underwhelmed right now.
Really?
I was
Right.
like, I mean, it's got the usual elements. It's got the dissonance. It's got that eeriness of Oceano. It's got the halftime breakdowns, the gutturals, and it was incredibly tight. But I almost just kind of felt a bit. I, I don't like saying this word, but it felt a little generic in places, if I'm honest.
Is it generic because, and I've cited this as a case in point on another review we've done tonight. The danger of being the originators of a sound is when everyone else takes it
Yep.
and then adapts it, the OG starts to sound not OG, just old.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Could be. Yeah. I don't know. I was a little bit kind of flat after it. I was like,
I also
huh.
feel there's a giant butt coming up here, and I don't mean you're about to stand up and turn round, but I kind of feel like that there's a big old weighty butt about to land here.
Well,
So
mass produced then kicked in, track two. And that was just like my faith was just completely restored at that point. That track, and I think that was the track we reacted to. I'm pretty sure it
yes.
was. That is just a breath of fresh air. Like that is an absolutely incredible track from Oceano. This is like them taking it to the next level. Much more interesting musically. The switches are clever. The breakdowns are fucking massive. It's got a touch more of a progressive feel in a lot of the
Hmm.
guitar work. It is almost kind of Djenty at times, which that's not new. They have touched on that already on previous albums like Incisions, but here it felt much more fleshed out. Like it didn't feel like an experiment on this album. It felt
Hmm.
like part of their sound. But I think the more progressive touches on the track also help transition their sound more smoothly into the other addition on this track, which is melody.
Hmm.
And the melody on this track is fucking outstanding. I never imagined Oceano would ever give us melody like this. Like
Hmm.
this, their sound has always had a bleakness to it. Like they were always fixated on that darker side of heaviness. They had the atmosphere, and there was like a melody in that, but it was always really dark. This is like almost the opposite of that, and it's like kind of uplifting almost. It's
Hmm.
very dreamy. Like the lead work is very soaring, and against that tone of Adams, that pulverizing voice, it's like just an incredible match together. But I think also because there's melody, um, it doesn't automatically mean like they've held back in any way either,
No.
because like the end riff on Mass Produced is just everything. Like it is just absolutely devastating. But I think because they transitioned from that kind of lighter melodic tone on the track, it
Hmm.
makes it sound even bigger. And it's a
If you've
very
got a
clever move.
track that's heavy all the way through, that lands at the end. You do
Oh,
this. Oh,
Jesus
but if
fuck.
you've got all the stuff that that track has, and then you land on that, you are literally pulverized. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It was just an incredible ending, but just that whole track was just sounded like them expanding on so much, and even the kind of dynamics of their sound. It was just even down to the fact that they've now got like kind of like nice synths on it as well that kind of thickens that backdrop, and
hmm.
there are some really cool like production techniques in the guitars as well, just adds a little bit kind of playfulness to it as well. But I was just, yeah, I love that track. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And from there on, to be honest, I felt like the album just starts to kind of flourish. Darkness Rising really utilizes those synths, getting into almost kind of like symphonic kind of territory at
Hmm.
times and parts, but also like grabs hold of that ethereal melody and atmosphere, really pushes the size of it, making it one of the most kind of expansive tracks on the album. I love the kind of dreaminess of it. Sounds huge, but there's also like so many kind of satisfying moments of heaviness where they just lock in as a band and deliver these really the OCEANO discordant kind of groove, big bendy notes on this one. And on that front, like the album doesn't disappoint. It is chock full of pulverizing riffs. There's some surprising moments on it as well, where they just occasionally just step out the box a little bit more. Like they maybe venture into something a little bit more blackened in
Mm-hmm.
occasion. You get a bit of that on The Price of Pain. And they only do it for like a couple of bars, but I actually felt it really worked with the riffs that they placed around about it. You can totally hear them paying homage to their early days on this as well. Like I could hear the qualities of like Depths or Contagion, that kind of era of the band, where it's really slow and dissonant. It's got that kind of gloomy overtone to it. And to be honest, I always felt like Oceano were a band that were a bit not overlooked, but maybe not the first band people would refer to when talking about great
Yeah.
deathcore albums. And to me, like some of the early stuff they done was some of the best in the genre. Like I know people still lose their shit about Lorna Shore and like the Diator's Murder and all that. They're great bands, but personally, I think the early Oceano material wipes the floor with them. I feel they are much more memorable albums than what those bands have done. Um, Talking about memorable, segue. I think this new release from Oceano could be one of the most memorable things they've done. And part of that comes from the melody, for sure, but also the kind of electronics and synths that they've woven into this
Mm-hmm.
album. Very clever. Little intros or like background kind of synth pads they've used on like Wounds Never Healed. I think
Oh,
it,
the synth stuff on Wounds Never
yeah,
Healed is ridiculously
crazy good.
fucking good.
Yeah. I think it adds more distinction to the tracks and it makes them stand out even more. And even like I know a lot of bands add synths and electronics, but they can sound quite like predictable or oh, I've heard that done previously. But I didn't feel like they went with completely predictable sounds on this
No.
either. Um, I think you probably expect Oceano to go with a more like ominous kind of melancholic kind of sound, and a lot of those kind of sounds they picked, but they didn't. There's like Wind Never Healed is very dreamy, very light.
The
Even though
chorus
the
is like it's like a reverby string piano that
mm,
plays behind the guitar, and it's
yeah,
the production's so fucking cleverly placed
yeah,
that it's placed enough behind the guitar to fill out that entire space, but at the same time not too far away that you lose the notes that are being played,
yeah,
but also not at the front where the guitar's kind of like, well, where's the because the guitar's always at the forefront of everything they're doing.
hmm
It's just really, really, really smartly produced.
yeah.
So
Uh,
game respects game, Dave. So
same,
man.
same, same goes with the lead work.
Yeah.
I think it's eerie when it needs to be, but it creates that darker mood. But then the uplifting stuff they do is a really cool counterbalance to that. I think Live in Chaos is a great example of them blending kind of both ends of that spectrum. On top of that, I got to mention the vocals. Like Adam, he's always been like one of the best for me. I think he's in kind of like peak form right now, to be honest.
Mhm.
Some like go back to the old stuff, and his voice was like some of the most brutal stuff you'd heard in the genre. But somehow his voice never ever seemed to decline over the
Mhm.
years. And that's kind of mind blowing considering the noise that
Technique.
comes out
You
of
know what I
him.
mean?
Yeah,
That to me is pure technique.
yeah,
If you're utilizing the correct technique and your voice will stretch to those ranges, you should be able to do it forever.
yeah,
Like if you have poor technique, you can't, and that's why. Listen to Phil Anselmo. As much as I love Phil Anselmo and he's my boy, and I think his voice, if anything, now is even more suited
yeah.
fucking 4 decades onto what he's doing now than he was doing then.
Mm.
He's like, his voice is like fucking audibly 4 octaves lower now because of like the lack of technique. It's just pure brute force.
Yeah.
This is it's so measured and controlled, and that's how you know it's technique.
Yeah. I think he's very versatile on this album as
Mm,
well. I think he's pushing his abilities a little bit further from his kind of range of his screams to adding a bit more of that tonal melody in certain sections, as well as there's some like melodic kind of backing layers that have been added in as well on the likes of Price of Pain and Broken Curse. And actually, it's probably the first time I felt like a kind of honest kind of emotion coming through in his voice as well. The Wounds Never Healed, I felt had that in spades. I could feel like that track had something personal to him on it. You know, I thought it was a really good performance on that track, and the album in general. I thought his vocals were incredible on this. Production wise,
Ugh.
fucking hell, this rips. Like it could be the most kind of crisp production that Oceano have ever had. It's super tight sounding, but and it's probably slightly more clinical than they've had on previous productions. And I think with the addition of these new elements, or not new elements, but the synths and the electronics, and having that kind of lighter melody blended in, I don't know the older style production would have worked on this. I think it'd been too dense, too claustrophobic for this more expansive kind of style. So I think they've nailed it on the production. Joey Sturgis has done a killer job on this. Like, it sounds heavy as fuck. But the light stuff and the melody stuff comes through really well, makes it sound huge. Yeah, this is Oceano, more mature, more evolved. It still has elements of the past, but I feel like they've widened their sound to show kind of more sides of the band, some which don't even fall within metal, to be honest. I think this just has way more dimensions to it than what they've done in the past. Don't get me wrong, the past was great. I fucking love those old albums, but it's cool to hear Oceano move forward and not just kind of repeat what they've already done. What about you? What did you think of this new one?
Yeah, so like, to me, having reacted to Mass Produced, I came in with lofty expectations. But because like my version of Oceano maybe didn't have, because I'd switched off so quickly to them. Once again, not because I disliked the sound, it was competing against a lot of other music that I was just going to listen to before I picked up like a deathcore album. And I was also, deathcore then is a different beast entirely. I think when we use it, it's like saying metalcore now. Metalcore now doesn't sound fuck all like what metalcore sounded like when metalcore started. So we've got to specify that by saying kind of mid to late 2000s deathcore. Let's just put that as a caveat there. So Mass Produced, entry into it, loved that single, was very interested. Wasted Life to me didn't sound as good as Mass Produced, but at the same time, there were elements where I was like, right, there's a theme here, and that theme is growth. To me, it sounded like something kind of new. Very much like yourself, though, this album does get better the further it goes on, and it kind of feels like the band open themselves up to a lot more experimentation. Darkness Rising is a fucking great example of that, but it almost pales in comparison to the track that follows after, which is Into the Flames, which throws everything. It's a kitchen sink song. So it starts off with blast beats, a Djenty riff. It then moves into a section where there is basically a widdly guitar solo playing in the background, a fucking huge section with synths, rapid blast beats, the most disgusting down tuned riff I've heard this year, and then like this like colossal clusterfuck ending, and like it's like everything in a kitchen sink in a track. I was fucking exhausted by track 4. Like, I'd been through that, and then it was almost as if the album was like, what's that? A little Game Boy electronic song there to bring you back in, and Wounds Never Heal kicked in. And I love that they keep building on the use of synths and the ideas in there. So that kind of Tetris sound plays through the entire song almost as a metronome for everything they're doing. And I love that because when they start building up other synth elements or clean guitar work there, it just starts to get bigger, almost like it's like playing Jenga and like continually trying to like any one of these elements is going to be too much and this track's going to fall over. And the precision, the temperament, and the construction is fucking awesome. And then when we went into interlude, which is basically an interlude, so they didn't know, we're like, that's what it is, guys. I kind of love the honesty there. I was at the point thinking to myself, like, is theirs to fuck up for me now? Because I've got 5 tracks that I really like. Let's see how the back half of this album plays out here. And then you're given 3 really fucking good tracks to close out on. Price of Pain is playful. It's fun. It's also maybe the most like fundamentally balls to the wall track on here in terms of it's the Oceano that I kind of remember in a lot of respects. Living Chaos comes after that. It's another track that has lots of really cool synth elements, but it's another goes for the jugular track. There's a couple of brutal breakdowns in that where he is just like his voice is going in a different register. It's fucking ridiculous. And then Broken Curse is a fucking awesome closer. Well, it's a track that kind of pieces everything together. It's slightly longer form. It shows a lot more cleaner elements. Dare I say it's got progressive like sections in here. It's the most prog that the band or probably ever have sounded up to this point, or maybe will ever sound. But it works as a closing track. But it's not the odd track on the album because it's a closer that it sounds so distant from it. It really, really works. It ties it all in. Production is fucking phenomenal. Drum work is excellent. Guitars so dexterous, like genuinely, really, really inventive. This guy could churn out Djent riffs all day, but the fact he kind of opens it up a little bit more, tries other things, huge techniques, influences from different decades, it really works in there. Synth work is exceptional. I love it, all of it. Like, there's not one bit where I felt like that's a lazy choice. And they use tons of different sims as well, but not to the point where I'm like, you're just fucking around with sims on a synth. And then lastly, vocals. Perfect. They don't adapt the band around the vocals. They don't try and adapt the vocals around the band. So there's a growth in the melody and the songwriting, but not to the detriment of the vocals. So it'd be so easy just to do like huge melody sections, and that vocal comes in, you're like, oh no, like get a guest vocalist in. They don't do that there. Like the balance is so fucking wafer thin on it. It's incredible. Yeah, it's a surprisingly Moorish listen. Once again, this is another stream. I hate streams, but I've returned to this a fair few times, which I would say right now, this is maybe the most I've ever listened to Oceano. And yeah, like for a band as long into the career as they are and being the originators of so many sims, I actually think listening to this, I can see us being 2-3 years down the road and hearing a ton of deathcore bands adopting a death wave approach of kind of co-opting a lot of these elements and going a lot more. We've done the atmospheric horror shit's been done to death.
Yeah.
And that's coming from someone that loves atmospheric horror shit. It's been done to death that I kind of feel like we're on the other side. I'll say this, there's on Darkness Rising in particular, there were elements on that track, maybe not necessarily vocally, but in the songwriting, the construction, the production, that reminded me of Grayscale Season. And I think they are so fucking they were the band that I kept thinking about. That's how Grayscale Season used synths. That's like all those elements that we love that band for, because they sound different amongst all that kind of new group of bands. Like Oceano are co-opting their sound, meeting a little bit of that, but elevating it beyond. So a lot to love here, man. Like, it lived up to that single, and has once again put them back on the radar for me. I know they were never off for you, but they brought me back in the fold. First time in over a decade. So
awesome. Last thing, scores for Oceano's new album Living Chaos. So now comes the question, where does this sit in the rankings?
Is this a harder scoring for you?
It is
because
very hard.
For me, I'm like that. Maybe the first two albums and nothing. So, like, to me, there's monumental growth here. So that's kind of easy for me. For you, as someone who has like basically hitched his wagon to pretty much all that early shit.
It's difficult, man. It's difficult to compare because this sounds quite different in many ways to those older releases as well. But on the listens I've had to this, and it was a stream, so I've only had maybe 4 listens to this one. I know. I think overall I'd say this is better than 2, possibly 3 of their previous albums. I'd still have
top 3 then, Dave?
Yeah, I'd say better. I'd say Depths and Contagion are above this. I think they're still
You're just
my.
gonna like the internet's just gonna you're just gonna have there's just gonna be comments where people are gonna be listing their top 6.
I know. I
I
know.
kind of love it. You're gonna stir it up, Dave.
Yeah. I mean, I've been listening to those albums for fucking almost 15 years. I mean, I don't think this is perfect, but I'll definitely see myself coming back to it when I'm in the mood for that Oceano heaviness, but maybe not quite as like bleak as the old shit. I'm going to go 4 out of 5 on this one. That was my gut, and that's what I'm sticking with. What are you thinking?
Oh yeah, this is a 4-star. Like I don't have the like, existential crisis that you have. It's a 4-star album. It's fucking great. It's heavy. There's enough to make me want to come back and listen to this again, like over and over again. And to me, I think the band are charting an interesting territory that I think they should lean more into. Hopefully, we won't have to wait 7 years for the next album, but
Yeah.
I think they've got something working here. It's really, really interesting. Their sound makes them sound a lot different than a lot of what this genre now has. I just need to be leaning into it more.
Nice. So that is Oceano, Living Chaos, out on August 30th. Links below to the band, to the pre-order link. Check it out, have a listen, see what you think. Let us know in the comments below. That is the review. Thank you for checking out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.